I'm Erica Bennett, 33, a trader who fought tooth and nail to make it, only to learn I've been played for a sucker. I bankrolled my family for years, taxes for their Oregon Coast beach house, my sister Sophie's shiny car, mom's endless medical bills. All I got was silence until one stormy night when a folder slipped from the counter at dinner. Inside was a $550,000 trust fund, every penny for Sophie. My jaw hit the floor. $500,000 for her while I'm breaking my back? Then the gut punches kept coming. They'd sold a cabin I'd rebuilt as a kid to fund it and pocketed the cash for her. Worse still, they'd forged my name on a beach house loan, banking on my blind loyalty. Dad's text sealed it. Taxes are due. No warmth, just a slap. I cut them off and threatened to sue, watching their world crack. Then Mom's letter landed. I was the accident they never wanted. Betrayal's just the start. This is my fight to take back what's mine. Curious how deep this rabbit hole goes, step into my storm. Rain battered the windows of my parents' suburban Oregon house as I pulled into the driveway, the late autumn evening wrapping everything in a damp gray haze. I was bone-tired, my body aching from a grueling week at the trading firm, my mind tangled in a mess of numbers and deals. Still, I'd dragged myself here for another family dinner, knowing it'd be the same tired routine, me playing the good daughter while they acted like I wasn't the one keeping their lives afloat. For years, I'd paid the property taxes on their Oregon Coast beach house, covered Sophie's car payments, and picked up Mom's medical bills, all without a single thank you. I stepped inside, the warmth of the house feeling like a hollow promise, and shrugged off my soaked coat. The scent of Mom's chicken soup drifted from the kitchen, mixing with the faint bitterness of Dad's cigar smoke lingering in the air. Sophie was already at the table, her new luxury watch catching the light as she scrolled her phone, a smug curve on her lips. Mom hovered near the stove, her shoulders tight like she sensed trouble brewing, while Dad sat at the head of the table, his stern face etched with the authority of a retired banker. I took my seat, the clink of silverware filling the quiet, but it didn't last long. Why'd you stop sending money for the beach house, Erica? Dad's voice cut through the room, sharp and cold. No greeting, no softness. I froze, my spoon hovering over the bowl, a drop of soup splashing back down. A spark of anger flared in my gut, hot and sudden. I've been busy, I mumbled, staring at the table, but he leaned forward, his gray eyes narrowing. Busy? We're counting on you. You don't just let us down like that. Counting on me? The phrase clawed at me, bitter and raw. Counting on me to prop up their cushy world while I ran myself into the ground? I flicked my gaze to Sophie, expecting her to jump in with some jab, but she just smirked, twisting that watch like it was a crown. Mom stayed silent, stirring her pot, her eyes anywhere but on me. I've been paying for everything, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. The beach house, Sophie's car, Mom's bills, years of it. And you're mad at me? Dad's face flushed, a vein ticking in his forehead. Don't turn this around, he snapped. We're a family. We need that place. A family. The word landed like a stone, empty and cold. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping the tile with a harsh screech, and stumbled to the counter, my hands trembling as I reached for a glass. I needed water, air, anything to douse the fire building inside me. That's when the argument escalated. You've got no idea what we're dealing with, Dad barked, standing now, his chair thudding against the wall. I spun around, my patience snapping. No idea? I'm the one keeping you afloat. My voice cracked louder than I meant, and in the heat of it, I yanked open a drawer for a napkin, desperate to wipe the sweat beading on my neck. Paper spilled out instead, fluttering to the floor. I cursed under my breath, bending to scoop them up, and then I saw it. A trust fund statement, $550,000. For Sophie Bennett, sole beneficiary. My breath caught, a cold fist gripping my chest. I snatched the sheet, my hands shaking as I scanned it again, the numbers searing into my brain. $500,000, all for her? I straightened, the paper crumpled in my fist, and turned to them. What the hell is this? My shout made Mom jump, her spoon clattering into the pot. Dad's mouth opened, then clamped shut, his face a mix of guilt and defiance. Sophie glanced up from her phone, eyebrows arched like I'd interrupted something trivial. Mom turned from the stove, her hands twisting together. But she didn't speak, just stared with those wide, nervous eyes. "Explain it," I demanded, shoving the paper at Dad. He grabbed it, his jaw tight. "It's for Sophie's future," he said, his tone clipped, like that was the end of it. "Her future?" I let out a laugh, sharp and jagged. "What about mine? I worked nights to pay for college while you sent her to some private school. I saved for my own car while you handed her keys at 16. And now this? $550,000 for her and I get nothing?" Silence fell, thick and heavy, the rain outside drumming harder like it was pounding the truth into me. Memories flashed through my head, every late shift, every skipped meal, every time they'd claimed hard times when I asked for help, all while they'd hoarded this fortune for her. Sophie shrugged, her voice cool and careless. "You're doing fine, Erica. You don't need it." Mom nodded faintly, her whisper barely audible. "You've always been so strong." Strong? The word twisted in me like a knife. I wasn't strong. I was used, a fool they'd milked dry while they built Sophie's throne. "You've been bleeding me dry," I said, my voice dropping low, icy with rage. "All of you." Dad started to argue, but I didn't hear him over the roar in my ears. I grabbed my coat, the trust fund paper still clutched in my hand. "I'm done," I spat, the words tasting like freedom laced with pain. I flung the door open and stepped into the storm, rain soaking me through as I reached my car. My pulse thundered, my hands trembling on the wheel as I sat there, the wipers slashing through the downpour. I stared at the house, its warm light mocking me, and let the truth settle in. $550,000 for her, and they still had the nerve to demand more? I'd given them everything, chasing a love they'd never give. No more. I wasn't their servant, their cash cow, their doormat. I'd been blind too long, but now I saw them for what they were. This was my breaking point, and I wasn't turning back. A week after that rain-drenched night, I stood in my Seattle loft, staring out at the city's gray skyline through tall windows, the quiet hum of downtown a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. I'd spent days replaying that dinner, the trust fund statement burning a hole in my mind. $550,000 for Sophie, nothing for me. The betrayal stung sharper with every memory, and I couldn't shake it. I'd been their cash cow for years, paying the beach house taxes, covering Sophie's car, footing Mom's medical bills, all while they stashed a fortune for her. My jaw clenched as I set my wine glass on the counter, the sharp clink cutting through the stillness. Enough was enough. I grabbed my laptop, opened my banking app, and canceled every payment I'd ever set up for them. The beach house, Sophie's car, their lavish trips. My finger hovered over the confirm button for a split second, then I pressed it. Done. My phone lit up almost instantly, a barrage of texts flooding in. Dad's came first. "What's going on with the beach house payment?" Mom's followed, timid and vague. "Erica, we need to talk." Sophie's was last, predictably petulant. My car payment bounced. "What did you do?" I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears, but I didn't type a word. Let them stew. I tossed the phone onto the couch, a cold satisfaction settling over me, like I'd finally peeled off a suffocating mask. Weeks slipped by, the silence growing heavier, until one evening I stood at my kitchen counter slicing an apple with slow, deliberate cuts. My phone buzzed, breaking the rhythm of the knife. I glanced down and saw Dad's name. "The property taxes are due." No greeting, no plea, just that bald demand glaring up at me. My hand tightened around the knife handle, the blade hovering midair, and a switch flipped inside me. They still thought I'd cave. I picked up the phone, my fingers steady as I typed. "Figure it out." I hit send, and a surge of power rushed through me, icy and fierce. I wasn't their doormat anymore. The next afternoon, I was still savoring that defiance when my old neighbor Tom called. We'd grown up together, and he'd always had a knack for digging up dirt my family tried to bury. "Hey, Erica," he said, his tone light. "Heard your folks sold that old cabin you worked on as a kid. Got a big chunk of cash for it, I guess." The words slammed into me, my breath catching hard. The cabin. I'd spent summers there as a teenager, hauling lumber, sanding floors, sweating under the sun because Dad called it our project. I'd poured my heart into it, thinking it tied us together, and they'd sold it? My stomach twisted, a raw, searing pain spreading through me. I mumbled a thanks to Tom, hung up, and dialed Sophie before the shock could settle. "Did you know they sold the cabin?" I demanded, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. She laughed, a careless little sound that made my blood boil. "Yeah, I guess they did. You're the successful one, Erica. You don't need anything from us." "Successful?" I gritted my teeth, my free hand curling into a fist. "You think that justifies them stealing from me?" I snapped, cutting through her smugness. Her silence stretched for a beat, then Mom's voice broke in, faint and wavering. "You were always so independent, honey. We thought Sophie needed the help more." Independent? They'd left me to drown while they built her a lifeboat with my own damn work. I slammed the phone down, the thud echoing in the loft, my nails digging into my palms until they left marks. That cabin wasn't just wood and nails, it was my time, my trust, my piece of them, and they'd cashed it in for her $550,000 trust fund. I paced the room, the hardwood cold against my bare feet, my mind a whirlwind of rage and clarity. They hadn't just favored her, they'd erased me, taken something I'd built and handed it to her like I didn't exist. I stopped by the window, the city lights blurring through a haze of anger, and felt it solidify into something unbreakable. I'd been their fool, pouring my life into people who'd never cared. But that ended now. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my breath fogging the pain, and made a vow to myself. No more handouts, no more bending over backwards for their excuses. They'd taken enough, my money, my effort, my past, and I was done giving. I pulled back, my jaw set, and turned from the view. This wasn't just about cutting checks anymore. It was about me, about clawing back the worth they'd tried to bury. They could beg until their voices broke, but I was through being their pawn. I'd rewrite this story on my terms, and they'd never see it coming. 3 weeks after I'd told Dad to sort out his own mess, I drove to the Oregon Coast beach house under a bruised November sky, the wind roaring off the Pacific and slamming waves against the shore. I hadn't wanted to come back, but a box of trading manuals and old photos waited there, pieces of myself I needed to reclaim before I could fully let go. The Seattle loft had become my refuge, yet those items tugged at me, a loose thread I had to snip. As I pulled up, the house loomed ahead, its shingles rattling in the storm, its faded charm swallowed by neglect. They must have come to check it before the bank seized it, I thought, noting the lights flickering inside. I stepped out, the salty gusts stinging my cheeks, and braced myself for a swift grab and go. But when I pushed the door open, my gut twisted. They were all there. Dad pacing the creaky floorboards, Mom fidgeting by the fireplace, Sophie sprawled on the couch like a sulky teenager. The air stank of panic, and I knew the unpaid taxes had finally cornered them. Dad spun toward me, his face a thundercloud. "What are you doing here?" I crossed my arms, my damp coat clinging to me. "Getting my stuff, nothing more." He scoffed, closing the distance between us. "Your stuff? You show up now, when we're drowning? That's rich, Erica." Drowning? The word almost made me smirk. I'd kept them afloat for years, and now they floundered without my lifeline. Mom's voice quavered as she stepped forward. "We're family, Erica. How could you let this happen?" Sophie bolted upright, her glare cutting through me. "Yeah, you're so selfish. You think this is some big joke?" I stared at them, a storm of rage and disbelief churning inside me. Selfish? After all I'd sacrificed? I opened my mouth to snap back, but Dad interrupted, his voice booming. "You've got no clue what you've done. We could lose this place." "Good," I said, my tone steady as steel. "Maybe you should have valued me while you had the chance." Silence crashed over the room, the wind howling outside like it mocked their stunned faces. I turned to the closet, my boots thudding on the floor, determined to grab my box and leave them to their chaos. Their panic felt off, though, sharper than just unpaid taxes, and a nagging itch made me pause. I yanked the closet door wider, spotting my box on a high shelf, and tugged it down. A stack of papers spilled out with it, fluttering to the ground. I muttered a curse, kneeling to scoop them up, when a single sheet caught my eye. A loan agreement, dated 5 years ago, listing me as co-signer for a $200,000 debt on the beach house. My breath hitched, a chill racing down my spine. I scanned it again, my hands trembling as the truth clawed its way in. They'd forged my name, tied me to their sinking ship, betting I'd never let it go under, all while hoarding $550,000 for Sophie. I shot to my feet, the paper crushed in my fist. "You put my name on this?" Dad's face drained of color, his mouth flapping uselessly. Mom clutched her sweater, her voice a whisper. "We didn't think you'd mind." Sophie rolled her eyes, lounging back. "Oh, come on, Erica. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I shoved the document at Dad, my fury boiling over. "You forged my signature. You trapped me in your debt without a word." He grabbed it, his jaw clenched tight. "We needed the cash. You were doing fine. We figured you'd cover it." Cover it? The words slammed into me, and I laughed, a jagged, bitter sound that bounced off the walls. They'd banked on my silence, my loyalty, my endless giving, while they pampered Sophie with a fortune. I stepped back, my hands shaking with the urge to break something. "You refinance this or you sell it," I said, my voice slicing through the room. "Or I drag you to court. Pick one." Dad's eyes bulged, his bravado cracking. "You wouldn't dare." Mom's sobs erupted, loud and rehearsed. "Erica, please, we're your family," Sophie sneered, her tone dripping venom. "You're just jealous. Always have been." I looked at them, truly saw them, and the illusion shattered. They weren't family. They were parasites, draining me dry until I had nothing left. "I'm done," I said, my voice flat and final. I snatched my box, the loan paper still gripped in my hand, and walked out, their protests fading behind me. The storm raged louder as I reached the beach, the waves pounding the sand like they wanted to erase every trace of this place. I stood there, the wind tearing at my coat, and let the weight of it all settle. I'd spent years chasing their love, pouring my money, my effort, my soul into a pit that would never fill. They didn't deserve me, not my help, not my heart, not even my rage. I dropped the box into my trunk and leaned against the car, the cold metal steadying me as I watched the sea churn. This wasn't about the house or the money anymore. It was about severing them from my life, root and branch. I'd been their crutch, their savior, but no more. I slid into the driver's seat, the engine growling awake, and cast one last look at the house. Its lights wavered in the gale, a dying ember of a lie I'd once believed. I drove off, the road unfurling dark and free before me, a quiet strength rising in my chest. They could sink or swim on their own terms. I was through, bearing their burden. 6 months had slipped by since I left the beach house in that November storm, and I stood now in my Seattle office watching the spring rain dissolve into a golden glow over the skyline. I'd rebuilt my life in that time, carving out a new rhythm with every deal I closed, every step I took away from their shadow. The trading firm buzzed around me, but I thrived in its chaos, earning a corner office and a name that carried weight. I'd gone to Iceland alone last month, stood beneath the northern lights, and felt a quiet strength take root, the kind I'd never known while tethered to their demands. No more paying their taxes, no more funding Sophie's car, no more propping up a family that saw me as a means to an end. I'd shed that burden, and the freedom was intoxicating. Word had reached me through a colleague. The beach house was gone, foreclosed and sold to some developer. Dad, Mom, and Sophie were scraping by, their cushy world unraveling despite that $550,000 trust fund they'd stashed for her. I didn't smirk or dwell on it. They'd survived without me, just as I'd flourished without them. I turned from the window, my heels tapping the polished floor, and settled at my desk to review a report. Mentoring new traders had become my focus, a way to pass on what I'd fought for, and it gave me a purpose their endless needs never had. Late that afternoon, I stepped out for coffee, and when I returned, I spotted it, a plain envelope under my office door, my name scratched in Mom's unsteady scrawl. My stomach tightened, a spark of old anger flaring, but I bent to pick it up, curiosity outweighing the instinct to toss it. She must have tracked me down through a mutual friend, I thought, tearing it open. A single page unfolded, her words jagged across it. "Erica, you were unplanned," she wrote. "An accident we didn't expect. We gave Sophie more to ease our guilt, to make up for our mistake with you." I sank into my chair, my breath shallow. the confession hitting me like a cold wave. Unplanned. An accident. That's why they'd pushed me aside, why they'd lavished Sophie with everything while I fought for scraps. It wasn't just favoritism, it was their regret, their failure dumped on me. My hands shook as I held the letter, the paper crinkling under my grip, and a bitter ache twisted in my chest. Part of me wanted to call her, to scream at them for turning their shame into my burden, but the impulse flickered and died. I didn't need their apologies, didn't need their reasons. They'd chosen their path, and I'd forged mine. I stood and walked to the filing cabinet, sliding the letter into a drawer I'd never open again, my fingers steady now. The words echoed, though, as I stepped onto my balcony, the city humming below, the spring air brushing my skin. I sipped my coffee, its sharpness anchoring me, and gazed at the horizon. Unplanned or not, I'd built this life from nothing, held it together while they leaned on me to prop up theirs. That trust fund, that forged loan, that cabin they'd sold, they'd taken it all, betting I'd never break free. But I had, and I stood taller for it. I didn't write back, didn't pick up the phone. A flicker of old hurt flared, a urge to cling to that pain, but I let it fade, choosing peace instead. I forgave them, not for their sake, but for mine, a final cut to the ties that had bound me. The sun dipped low, casting gold and pink across the skyline, and a calm settled over me, deep and unshakable. 6 months ago, I'd been their ghost, their silent crutch, but now I was whole, a woman they'd never truly known. I'd stopped chasing their validation, stopped weighing my worth by their twisted measure. They could keep their trust fund, their excuses, their broken world. It didn't reach me anymore. I leaned against the railing, the coffee warm in my hands, and watched the city pulse with life. This was my dawn, my triumph, my claim. I'd ripped free of their grasp, not just from their accounts, but from the prison they'd locked around my soul. They'd never know the woman I'd become, and that was their loss, not mine. I straightened, my jaw firm, and turned back to my office, the skyline softening into dusk behind me. I was Erica Bennett, strong, unburdened, and mine, a name I'd earned with every scar, every step, eyes wide open to the life I'd claimed. They could stumble in their wreckage, but I was done lifting them up. My story started here, and it was mine alone to write. Looking back, I see it all now. I wasted years pouring my money into that beach house, my effort into their lives, chasing a love they'd never give. The truth cut deep. My worth wasn't in propping them up. It was in walking away. That $550,000 trust fund, the forged loan, the cabin they sold, those weren't just thefts of cash, they stole pieces of me. I learned to stop giving to those who only take, to claim my life instead. Strength isn't swallowing pain, it's saying no more and standing by it. That's what I did when I cut them off, and I've never felt freer. What about you? Ever poured yourself into someone who didn't care? Felt that burn of being used? Tell me your story. Did you cheer when I left them in that storm, or would you have rewritten their ending? Share it below. I'm all ears. Your voice counts, and I want to hear it. Thanks for sticking with me through this fight. There's more ahead, so don't go far. I'll catch you in the next round of this wild ride.